everyone. Welcome back to the Optimization Toolbox. My name is Jenna Redfield, and today we have a special guest, Kristyn Ivy. She is a home organizer, and she runs an awesome Instagram account, which is actually how I found her. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jenna. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about
Let's
it.
geek out.
Clutter.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, we could go a million directions, and I always say this in the podcast, but let's talk with how you got into what you're doing now and kind of why you love what you do and how you started it.
Sure. So right now I'm a virtual pro home organizer and I have a certification in something called Kon-mari, which we'll talk about a bit. So I do specialize in that style of organizing, and I've done that for the last 6 years, but there was a very windy path to get there. I originally was an undergrad for engineering
Mm.
and went into typical corporate work, being a consultant in a different way, a contractor for the government, a project manager. And for the first 5 years of that job, I was like, cool, this is great. Love my team, love the work. And then after that, I saw my boss like just being so passionate about what we were doing. And I realized that I wasn't there and I
Mm.
would never be there.
Mhm.
And that was the day that I started to explore kind of privately, quietly, ways that I could maybe exit that field and do something where I felt like I was making more of an impact, doing something that truly mattered. And so I went to design school, actually.
Wow.
Went to got a graduate degree. Took about 4 years to complete that, going at night after work, still working full time, trying to figure out if that was the next direction. And when I graduated grad school, or I didn't consider that I would be promoted within my corporate job, but then would have to take an entry level design job to get
Mhm.
started in the industry. So I did a lot of volunteering, but I really felt stuck because I saw where I could go, but I just couldn't figure out how or if that was the appropriate next step. And magically, we can say, the timing just worked out. The universe gifted me with this book called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo.
Mhm.
It was about organizing, and I have to say, I loved, just like we were saying, like I have an affinity for putting things in order and organizing. So when I saw like a new approach, something fresh on this topic, I was like, oh, let me dive in. Like, so I read the book cover to cover when I was in Jamaica with my family on a like Christmas trip or something. And then I came back and I had lost my luggage for a while, like the whole trip. I didn't have luggage, but when I got that back, got over that crisis, I read or I applied everything that I had read on vacation pretty much immediately by working through my clothing.
Mhm.
And when I worked through my clothing, it felt familiar because, like I said, I wasn't afraid to declutter or organize. I would purge my things every year cyclically, and I would celebrate with my friends all this excessive
Mhm.
spending and all of these things that I would let go in the masses every year. And I saw nothing wrong with that. My friends like celebrated that. They love
Mhm.
that. It's wow, you're just so organized. And that's what I thought organizing was
Mm.
until I actually walked through this method and did another declutter, but then stopped and asked myself,
Mm.
okay, so why do I once again have so many things that I don't want? Even $300 worth of things that did not spark joy, but still had tags on them,
Mm.
brand new that I hadn't worn. So that's the day or the moment where my perspective really shifted around what it truly means to be organized and how it's not just buying the fanciest box. It's actually really adopting this lifestyle of being clutter free, only or like redefining what enough means for myself. And so that was a moment I realized also that the shopping that I was doing was
Mm.
directly associated with how I was feeling in my career,
Mhm.
how I was just like literally bearing the guilt, the shame
Mm.
of finished business, unfinished or realized career aspirations, all those
Mhm.
things I was bearing down, and just clicking instead, just click click click. It was
Mhm.
my way of escaping. And so all that was happening when I was just in the first category of clothing. I got so much more to do.
Yeah.
So I walked through the category in the strict order of books, paper. Then once I got to miscellaneous, it all clicked in my mind. I'm going to combine the fact that I've been a project manager, I'm very creative and love interior spaces, and the fact that I love organizing and putting things in order and understand this method to its core. Like, I literally texted my friend, I was like, if this ever becomes a thing, like in the United States and there's
Mm.
consultants, like I'm there. And then 2 months later, I got the email and I threw my credit card information in into that training, and actually got trained in the second class they ever offered in the United States,
Oh,
and then
wow.
became consultant number 12. And now there's like
Wow.
600 of us
Yeah.
in like 40 plus different countries and things like that. But
Oh, you were early.
yeah, I was very early. I knew that that was what I was going to do. I was very sure about that.
That's awesome. I love that you figured out that that was your passion and you just were like, nope, I found it. And
Yep.
you have stayed. And what year was that? Was that like,
That was like 2016, around
oh,
that
wow.
time frame. Yep.
So
2000.
that's almost like 7 years.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, because I started my company Twin Cities Collective in 2016. So it's like it just seems like almost like a lifetime ago sometimes.
Sure. Yeah,
Like
I
like
totally
so
get
much
it.
has changed in the world. But so I have read that book and I have seen her show on Netflix as well, which I know a lot of people know her from that as well.
Sure.
So what was it about that method that really caught with you? Because I feel like there's a lot of different
Mhm.
types of methods, and I know that like there's just I'm just curious what about that method like made sense to you?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I like to call it radical self-care. So I put the Kon-mari Method square under the umbrella of radical self-care. These activities in your life, and sometimes they can last a weekend, sometimes they last a couple months, where it's like a temporarily you are super focused but also uncomfortable. These are unglamorous things, these are tedious tasks and often underrated tasks, but they're necessary for you to learn and grow. So that's exactly what attracted me to it, not the stuff that's glamorized in things like the Netflix or
Mm,
the media, like, oh, the number of bags that are leaving, or, oh, like, does it spark joy? And, things that have kind of been, thrown around as associated, the folding, all of those things are great. They're
mm,
all part of the method and they're all aspects I love. But what really, like, made me pause and say, "Oh, this is different," is all the non-glamorous things. The fact
mm,
that this is truly a method that teaches you basically the art of discernment, making good
mm,
decisions. It also teaches you how to get things done, to set a time for yourself to basically the self agency that you need
mm,
to manage a home and to manage your consumption, which is the other aspect. Nobody wants to talk
mm.
about consumption. Nobody wants
Yeah,
to look
I
at,
do.
okay, how
I
does
do.
this?
I want to talk
Yes,
about
let's
it.
do it. Yay! I and then that's exactly why I'm here, because as soon as I saw optimization, I was like,
Yes.
yes, these are my people. But yeah, like consumption, oh my gosh, I took that to a whole nother level because I realized that my particular clutter issue was the things crossing the threshold, the things coming
Mm,
in and out, because I would work hard to get to a place of organization, but then would fall apart because I would push those boundaries. I wouldn't ground does it spark joy in anything. And now I
mm,
know that it's necessary to ground it in the vision of how you want to live and the boundaries of your space. And that's what I help people do, so it's not just this floating thing and they're just like in this gray area of like, maybe it sparks joy, everything sparks joy,
yeah.
right? I like to say, like, it gives you the permission to keep whatever you want to, but it also gives you the permission to keep
Mm,
whatever you want to. You have to be real careful
true.
about that. So
Well, yeah, I moved last year, and
yeah.
so that was a big thing because, well, I was okay. Let me go back. So I used to be a product photographer. So I would have all these props that I
Ooh,
just
yeah.
bought over time, and I spent thousands on these props.
Mhm.
And then one day I'm just like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I had all, and then I was moving. So I'm like,
Yes.
what do I do with all this stuff? So it's like I had to go through and be like, well, I spent a lot of money on this. And
Yes.
like, do I sell it? Do I give it to the Goodwill? Like, it was hard because it's like
Mhm.
that was an entire business inventory that I had to get rid of. And it was like, and for a long time I just bought pretty things because that was also I was like excusing it as like I could photograph this, but also like it just like my whole office was just full of like cutesy little things, and that became a problem. And it was just kind of it's funny because it's like, oh, it's just decor, but like that was my thing. And now at this point when I go to like Home Goods, I'm just like, I can't, it's just like I
Mhm.
have to like reel myself in. So the idea of consumption and just putting limits on yourself to like really think about, what you bring into the home, I think is just as important as what leaves. Because I think the KonMari
Sure.
method is a lot about what to get rid of or what to save, but what about what you bring in? I think that is actually
Mhm.
something that we don't talk about. And as a lot of the ADHDers that are listening to me, impulse purchases, impulse spending, being
Sure.
in line at the grocery store and being like, oh, I need to buy that and that and that and that. Like, do you help with that part of the mindset? Or like, I mean, you probably get to people after they've already gotten the stuff, but like, how do you help people not continue to bring stuff in that like they don't need?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's a couple things I want to mention there. I love that you tied the KonMari method with a move. It's great to
Mm,
do that for anyone who feels overwhelmed. If they are moving, like that's
mhm.
another activity that kind of dismantles your home.
Yes.
So you might as well do the tidying event at the
Mhm.
same time as a move. And for anyone who's not familiar with KonMari, it is about shifting your perspective to viewing tidying up as an event. So that is
Mm,
what actually helps you maintain it. So you do this comprehensive, literally touch and make a decision about
mm.
every single thing in your home, down to the
Wow.
yearbook in the damp, dark brown
Mm,
box in the basement. Like you're literally doing this holistically.
mhm,
And because you're exercising that decision making muscle so much and that understanding yourself through these objects, then your maintenance shifts dramatically. Your ability to
mm,
maintain things because you are literally training yourself to lean into the abundance. You know what? Like, I love when my clients say
mm,
stuff like, oh my God, like, I never want to do this again. Like, and I'm like, yes, that's what I
mm,
want to hear because, like, they've gotten to a point where they're like, I'm changing, I'm doing things differently from that point forward. I'm going to say no, even to something that's free that I know I don't need, or I'm going to say, okay, it is very clear in my vision of my future that I need to put this past activity of product photography to rest. That season of my
mm,
life is now over.
mhm,
These things are literally props sitting in your house. Like
mhm.
they
Literally,
literally
they just sit there and do
are. They just
nothing, and
sit
they take
there,
up
right?
space. Yeah, and
Right.
I did not have enough space at my new place to
Hmm.
keep them because they were all in like a storage room that I don't now have. So it's
Yes.
like
Yes.
I like in my head I was like, well, maybe I'll need them in the future. Like, it's just like in my
Yes.
head I'm like, well, and that's the thing about a lot of storage, and I'm not a
Hmm.
fan of people having storage units because I'm like, do you actually use that stuff? Like in my
Right.
head, like I'm like, really think about it. It's like, do you need that much stuff?
Hmm.
Like, obviously, if you're like moving or something and you need to put it somewhere temporarily or you're out of the country or something, like I understand, but it's like long term. I don't understand.
Sure.
It's just I'm like think like I don't know. And maybe that's just my opinion, but it's just like I think as American society, we just have this old like too much stuff. Like we just have too much stuff, and
Yeah.
I think it's a problem that you know and I know there's like collectors and things, and it's just like, but it's like I don't know. I don't want to get controversial here, but like I just think there's too much of it sometimes.
Yeah, and there's definitely certain scenarios where storage facilities
Mhm,
are make perfect sense.
mhm.
For example, my parents got some storage units because we had four people pass in our family in a
Yes,
very short
yes, yeah.
time frame,
Mhm,
and so their things all kind of landed on my
mm,
parents all at the
mhm.
same time,
Yeah,
and they were still dealing with
going
the
through the
emotions around
yeah,
grief and they
mhm,
couldn't,
yeah.
but they set a time limit. They
That's
said,
what I'm
okay,
saying,
in 2
temporary, yeah,
years,
mhm,
and it's rare
yeah,
that people do to
mhm,
set those strong boundaries around storage facilities, and
mhm,
that's the downfall, unfortunately,
mhm,
sometimes for those. But I
mhm,
do want to really emphasize the perspective of viewing tidying as an event, and of course,
mhm,
there's maintenance involved. We can talk
mhm,
about that,
mhm,
but the main event. That's one aspect I love, but the other aspect that gets completely lost in the media and in terms of this method is that it's actually not an exercise in how much you can let go at all.
mm.
it's literally designed to shift your attention and your focus on what you're choosing to keep and what that
Mm,
means. So when you decide you want to keep something, you are also telling yourself, okay, I am going to be responsible for this amount of
mm,
variety, this amount of collection in my life, of cleaning these things, remembering I have them, putting them back in their place. Because I have almost like a maximalist closet that I'm sitting in here, I
mm,
would say. I lean more maximalist. I like
mhm.
patterns, I like colors. You can see just by the
Yeah.
in the frame, right? So I do not, have the beige aesthetic going on, or the like a couple tops or the capsule wardrobe. I have 58 pairs of shoes and I own that. Like
Mm,
it does not bother me one bit to have to manage that. I never view it as a chore to put these things away. I love the clothes. But then I have like two cutting knives, right? And I don't
mm,
really value like entertaining
yes.
in my inside my home or
Mhm,
cooking regularly. So I made that compromise based
mm,
on my lifestyle. So that's why I start with a billion questions about people's
mm,
lifestyle before I even start guiding them towards how they're going to make these decisions, because that's what's missing when people land on those
mm,
moments where they're like, should I keep these props? I don't know.
mm.
And then they get stuck. So yeah, so I like to always correct
Yeah.
that, because the method isn't about how much you'll leave, but unfortunately what gets on TV, the garbage bags leaving the home,
Mhm,
all that's reinforced. But and that's how we traditionally think about
mm.
decluttering, right? But this is
Yeah.
about choosing the joy.
I also think
Mhm.
that it's like it doesn't change your mindset if you just get rid of stuff and then just keep being the same way that you were before, because it's going to come back again, and it's almost like if you don't fix the problem, then it's going to continue to be a problem. And I think that's kind of what
Yes.
your method is talking about, is like fixing the root of the issue of why it's getting this way. And I like what you said, like it's customized based off of the person. So like you can't always take blanket advice. Like you should have 10 shirts and 12 pairs of pants. Like people have, for example, I live in Minnesota. We have two very, very different seasons. So I have to have a lot of winter and summer clothing.
Hmm.
And so it's like, and some people in California, it's like 75 and sunny all the time. So they just have
Right.
one wardrobe. I have to have two completely separate wardrobes. I also have to have like snow boots and jackets. So it's like we just have more stuff in terms of like, but it's not always used every day. So, but I can't get
Hmm.
rid of my winter jacket. So it's like, so it's like everyone, depending on where they live, depending on the size of their home, depending on, there's a lot of things. So when you read a book and it's like, you should have this, it's like, you can't like take that. You have to customize it to yourself.
Exactly. I was just talking to a client about that, because I was saying how, hi, client, I'm about to teach you this methodical thing. And I'm also going to tell you to throw out all rules because none of them matter.
Mm,
Like, we're
so
going to
true.
customize the standardized process to whatever works for you. So I was joking with them about that, because like I'm constantly telling people, like, don't marry yourself to the rules. They're helpful starting
Mhm.
place, but yeah, there's so much room for customization based on your unique choices and ways of living.
Yeah, and I think also one of the things I've looked into, and I don't know if you know much about, like the clutter bug. Do you know them at all? The clutter bug group,
Your
that
bug.
the woman that does clutter bug. So it's like there's like four different types of like ways people like to organize. One is like
Mhm,
open and like where you can
mhm.
see everything. One is
Yes.
where everything's like closed in and stuff. And I don't remember, there's like four different types of like bugs that it's just like her method. But
Mhm.
I find that interesting because I found if I don't see the stuff in my house, I
Yes.
forget it's there because of object permanence. So I'm a proponent of clear bins.
Mhm.
And that's just me. And I've always like told people, I'm like, you should do clear bins. And then I watched that show on HGTV with her, and I was like, oh, maybe not everyone likes to see all their stuff.
Mhm.
So how do you like once you've like, and maybe this is just the part that I get excited about, is like the actual like containing, but like
Sure.
how do you work with people like to know how they even want their space to be, and then also like how much are involved are you in the process of helping them contain the stuff that they're doing and all that? I'm just so curious about that.
Sure, sure. So tidying is decluttering plus organizing.
Mhm.
And it's so important to handle the decluttering first before skipping over to the organizing because you don't want to find yourself in a
Yeah.
place where you're organizing something that doesn't matter. Or you
Mhm.
could have the fanciest bin in the world, but if it's stuffed to the brim, you're still going to feel like things are cluttered, or you still might
Mhm.
even have trouble finding things. So I actually had a very polarizing piece of content, I will say,
Oh,
over on TikTok about visual clutter, which is something that a lot of people are
yes.
not aware of really, really matters.
Mhm.
And it's something that it's almost something I didn't even talk about because it's almost
Mm.
second nature to me. But it's something that some people are so unaware of. The noise and the information that you're reading in your home every day. And sometimes it is actual words, labels on
Mm.
things. Sometimes it is just like visual designs or colors,
Mhm.
and some people have more of a tolerance for that, and some people have less of a tolerance for
Mm.
that. So you just want to keep that in mind and
Mhm.
figure out where you are in the scale. Now, let me say, a lot of people were saying, "Well, I'm a maximalist."
Mm.
Or I'm a minimalist. Like it brought out
Mhm.
everyone. This video brought out all the people,
Mm.
and we definitely had a discussion about object permanence
Mhm.
because that's something that my neurodivergent clients
Mhm.
definitely struggle with. So
Mhm.
it's about creating the compromise. So
Mm.
maybe you have a clear container, but maybe the bottles that are in that clear
Mm.
containers are turned a certain way, so it's just a solid instead of you seeing
Mm.
all of the words,
Or they have
or
containers within containers. Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Or maybe within that clear container, you have a very small label on the outside,
Mm.
or it is slightly frosted. So it's not opaque and it's not
Mm.
clear. It's like an in between.
Mhm.
So there's definitely ways to compromise there,
Mhm.
and it's case by case, and it's really something I have to kind of work through with a lot of visual examples and things. But I just like to bring a lot of attention. I have a whole series on TikTok called Tag Off, where I'm just taking tags off of stuff
Oh.
like your flat iron, like your hot tools.
Yeah.
Anyone listening to this, if you have a hot tool, please take that tag off of the
Oh
cord. You
yeah,
do not
I
need
don't
it.
think I probably need to do that. Like,
Right.
yeah. Well, I know there's like one hack that I saw where you use a hair dryer to get
Yes.
stickers off. I was like, that's
Yes.
great. Like, so
Uh-huh.
I saw that. I think I found that on TikTok, and I'm like, oh my
Yep.
gosh, I always get stickers stuck on things that you've had forever. I mean, there's
Sure.
so many great, and I'm a big hack person. Like, if there's a hack, I will try it. Because I'm like, I want to make things easier. That's why I call this podcast. I almost called this like something hacks because I'm like, I want to learn all the hacks. There's actually a podcast called All the Hacks that I love, and it's just hacks. It's like people come on and share their favorite hacks, and I'm like, that's what I want with this
That's awesome.
podcast. But so okay, so you work with clients, and I know that you have like a podcast and all this stuff. So how do you organize your like social media, and like how are you putting it out there, and how are you like explaining this, and how are you kind of promoting yourself and your business? Because I always like to talk about marketing too, because that's my background.
Sure. Sure. Well, definitely on TikTok, which is something I started this year, for 2 years or maybe 3. I don't know how long TikTok's been around, but
Mm.
it's been a long time because
Yeah.
I've been getting so many pings from mentors, from friends, from
Mm.
family saying, "You should be on TikTok. You should be on
Yeah.
TikTok." And I was like, "Oh, not another thing." Or I was really, to be honest, super nervous about
Mm.
trolls as well. I was like, "I
Oh
have such
yeah.
peace in my life. I don't really want to
Mhm.
like actively engage with the aggressive amount of trolling that happens on that platform." So I was like nervous about that, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And at the top of the year, I promised myself I would post one video a day for 365 days. And
Wow.
so far I'm keeping to it.
Nice.
And I mean, we are having a blast over there, I will say.
Yeah.
But like, oh my gosh, the people I'm meeting, the questions I'm getting are just so thoughtful, and the feedback, like, it has not been abundance of trolls, like, cross my fingers.
Mm.
And it's just been people wanting to learn more and understand how to just live clutter free and embrace radical self-care. So that's definitely a big part of my marketing. And also on my Instagram side is where like my existing clients are, where new people coming over from TikTok are. from other people who support me in the consultant community. So I'm very active on Instagram stories over there. That's where I share all the behind the scenes, all of the
Mm,
client stories, all the ins and out, my story, just daily check-ins. And I on Mondays even I ask the question, how can I help it? What's your burning
mm,
tidying question? Burning tidying challenge. And I get great questions through that. So that's part of my marketing. And then we have sunset this podcast, but I did for
mm,
3 years run a Spark Joy podcast with my
mhm,
co-host Karen Sochi, and that still exists. We created it
mm,
and designed it to be listened to while you tidy, and it
I love
talks
that.
about the transformative power of this method, and it is evergreen. So
Mm.
even though there aren't new episodes, there's still 98 plus hours of
Wow.
content over there. On
Yes.
everything. Even there's an episode on moving, which I'm
Oh,
actually about
nice.
to remind people on TikTok that that's over there, because I'm
Yeah.
doing a video on moving this week. So yeah, that is also a way people find me through the podcast for sure.
Yeah, and I love that you have like multiple different platforms for different people, because like some people are audio learners, some people are
Yes.
visual learners, and some people aren't on TikTok, and some people are on Instagram. So it's like I found that like getting my Instagram followers over to TikTok is really hard, but
Hmm.
getting TikTok to Instagram is a little easier because it's like they're already on Instagram. But a lot of Instagram people are just like, I don't get TikTok, and I'm like,
Yes.
but I started TikTok like 2020, like right when the pandemic hit. That was when I joined because I was also hesistant. I was like, is this gonna be like a fad, like Vine?
Right.
And yet I went to like film school and like I have a background in video. So I'm like, I should be on there. And I never done short form vertical video ever in 2020, which is crazy to think now because it's like reels, everyone's doing it. And now I teach it and everything. But like back then, I never edited a video on my phone. I'd only done it on a computer. So now like life has completely changed, but I think that honestly, like even with this podcast, like part of me is like, is it worth the time versus like having just short form content, which can do just as well and it doesn't take as well. But
Mhm.
I like having conversations, and then also I can turn this into clips and that sort of thing. So for me, it's like
Yes.
I think long term, and also people in the world just know what a podcast is, so they're like, "Oh, you have a podcast? That's cool." So for me, it's like I do think long term, it's like having a podcast is a positive thing, and I'm glad that you have all your episodes, and I think that that's really helpful to people, especially if you make content that points back to the specific episodes that you already had. Like yeah,
Exactly.
because you can kind of just be like, these are all the episodes on all the things that I cover, and if you want more in depth on that
Yes.
topic. So what are some of the topics that you covered on that podcast, just so I know, and maybe we can go and I can ask you some more questions about some of those, because I'm curious what some of the major like themes are that you get a lot of questions about, or like what are the biggest struggles that people have.
Sure, sure. A couple come to mind. The first is definitely like how to get started.
Mm,
So our most popular episode is the
mm,
KonMari 101, which is our
mhm,
I think it's episode 1. And then there's an early episode, I think it's like 5. I have them memorized at this point, about the vision of your ideal home and lifestyle, which is
mm.
another aspect again that Netflix kind of broke, just oop, yep, we'll talk
Yep.
about that for two
Mhm,
seconds. Now, this is what people want to see, the drama.
mm,
Going back to the roots, that part that people skip, they go right to their closet, pull out the clothes, and it's like, wait, there's something that has nothing to do with the items that you have to do, and that's
mm,
the ideal home and life. So I have a whole episode on that, and that's really popular too. Also, how to plan your event. No one,
mm,
again, unglamorous, but important part of your overall success for a holistic change in your home, to actually plan, make time for this. And that's a popular one. Also, the ones around miscellaneous items, which is a
mm,
big category. It
mhm.
almost should be broken up into
Yeah.
different parts. Because I call it Amazon.com. It's like everything you can
Mm,
imagine: kitchen, bathroom,
mhm,
electronics, beauty products, all the things. Um, so that's a lot of people get stuck there. So that's
mm,
another episode. People love the kimono, which is Japanese for
mm,
miscellaneous. And then the topics I get pinged about the most, there's 3. Paper clutter is
mm,
one that is we've
mhm,
dedicated a whole episode to. Tidying with kids is also one
mm,
that people
mhm,
often need help with. And moving is
Mhm.
also one that people request a lot, and maintenance, how to maintain this life like, after your event. Now what? The now what kind of
Mhm.
questions. So, yep.
Yeah, let's talk about paper
Yeah.
because I am very into organizing files. Like that
Uh-huh.
is my like geeky thing is I've always been obsessed with organizing whether it's a file system. I'm just like that's like always been my thing that I've always been somewhat good at, which
Yep.
is kind of funny. Like you can kind of see behind me. I have like here, let's see if you can see it. I have all of these like 3-ring binders just
Uh-huh.
of like different like things I printed out. But then I've also like started using, which a lot of people know that listen to this. I teach Notion, which is like a organization tool software. And so I've instead of doing it now printed, like I do a lot of stuff virtually. So I'm always like a proponent of like if you can have the paper be put on your computer, you get rid of a lot of it physically in your home if
Mhm.
you can. And that's always my thought is like I probably will get rid of all those binders someday. But like for me, I'm like is there a way that I can turn all of these things that are paper or even photos? Like I want to have someone on to talk about photos because photos you can scan, you can, I mean, you should still keep a physical copy, but it's like there's so much you can put on your computer and actually utilize. Right. So I think
Yes.
that to me, like that's my biggest passion is just getting your files digitized. And I don't know if you do that at all or like what are your thoughts on some of this stuff?
Sure. Well, I think it goes back to the vision, just like we were talking about how there's no universal thing that I'm about to say
Yeah.
for people. It's more like this is where you start and then you figure out your tolerance. So
Mm,
similar to visual noise, you figure out your tolerance for paper.
mm,
So it's something for some reason, I know a couple of reasons why, but evokes a lot of fear in people.
mm,
One, it shows up everywhere, right? Because a
mhm,
little tiny piece of paper seems like nothing, but when
mhm,
it's scattered all about and in
mhm,
every single room, including kitchen and bathrooms, everywhere, that's it feels like it's everywhere, and therefore that's the narrative that we feed ourselves. And then it's scary because people assume that it will always return in that same volume, and it's just going to always be a problem. So people feel like, well, if it's just always going to be a thing, then I shouldn't even bother, kind of
mm,
thing. That's also
mhm.
another narrative, which is totally not true either, because
Yeah.
there's so many things you can unsubscribe from to basically what I say, turn off the faucet.
Yes.
So that's where like the fear is coming from. Also, and this applies to paper and other
Mhm,
forms of clutter. Often the paper is not necessarily something that needs to be kept. It's just
mhm.
representative of unfinished business, a
Mm,
task that has been deferred or delayed, and people don't want to address that. So
yeah.
they start to view all their paper that way. So Marie Kondo, her blanket statement, universal again, but we're going to break it down more,
Mhm,
is like the best way you can declutter paper is to get rid of it all.
mm,
And so that's pretty
mhm.
progressive. It's like one of the things she takes the most progressive stance on.
Wow.
But again, me telling every client that would not work,
Mm,
like that's not
mhm.
going to work for everyone. It's not even going
Yeah.
to work for me.
Mhm,
So I like to again go back to people's vision and literally talk to them about how much square footage in their home they're
mm,
willing to devote to actual paper. Because I will say, as much as I love helping people scan things and digitize things, I also have a big conversation with them before we even get to that step about like, is this even worth scanning? Because we don't want to
mm,
turn another and even invisible, so to speak, space into clutter as well, because
yeah.
then you're just shifting the problem
Yes,
somewhere
yes.
else. So we do scan, but we do it very strategically.
Mm,
And then things like photos that make sense to like
mhm.
permanently archive digitally.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the boring paper, which is another reason, my last reason why you what to say why your listener might be
Mm,
a little bit intimidated by paper, is that it is often confused with the other clutter category in the KonMari process, which is called sentimental items. So people
oh.
lump things like their kids' artwork and that newspaper article from high school that they were
Mm,
in they lump it together in with like their taxes and their insurance forms
Uh,
and therefore create it like, oh gosh, paper is such a big deal. But I'm like, actually,
mm,
if you take out the bank statements and like these like boring things, and that's actually
and user
paper.
manuals,
Mhm,
that's what I have a lot.
exactly.
Mhm,
Yes, user manuals, all
mhm,
those things. If you separate them out from these like big deal sentimental
mhm.
things that are made of paper, but not paper clutter,
Mm,
and handle those boring things first before you jump into emotional things like
yeah,
sentimental items, it's so much easier. but
that's so
but yeah,
true.
people build it up in their mind as this big thing. So I
Yeah.
love helping people get over that.
Yeah, I think that's so true because I've had to like my mom. It's funny because some of my stuff is still at my parents' house,
Sure.
and so it's like they want to keep it. I don't need to keep it, but it's like it was mine. Like for example,
Hmm.
like artwork from my life. It's like, but then part of me is like, I don't want them to get rid of it either, but I also don't want to have it here at my house. So it's like
Hmm.
there is a lot of stuff. Gosh, that like brings me back. The one thing I have kept that is somewhat not embarrassing, but like I have a lot of my childhood toys.
Uh-huh.
And I've pared down over the years and got rid of stuff, but I still have quite a bit of a parents' house of like my old Barbies and like all that stuff. And that is just something that I'm struggling to get rid of because I'm like,
Sure.
maybe if I have a child someday, like I'll give it to them, or like I just want to have it. But then what I've done, and this is something that I always tell people, is like take a picture of it
Hmm.
because it's the memory that you are keeping, not the item. And
Yes.
so I think that that's one thing I've started doing is like I took a picture of it so that I remember what it looked like, but I don't need to keep that physical item. Not,
Mhm.
I mean, some of them I will, but like not everything. And I think that
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know if you like subscribe to that, but that's just like something that that's like the one thing that I hold on to that maybe not everyone does, but like I just am very nostalgic about my childhood toys.
Sure, sure, and own that. This is
Yeah.
about being unapologetic about the things we are keeping. This is not a
Hmm.
minimization exercise, unless that is your goal. Some people
Yeah.
are like, my goal only goal is to literally have a less number of things in my home. And if that
Mm,
is the case, then that's the vision, and we go in that direction. But universally, this is a keeping exercise. So when it comes to sentimental things, first thing I'm going to tell you is if you do walk through the Kon-mari Method as a
mm,
true event, you have to include the things that are at your parents' house
mm.
because it is literally
Yeah.
designed by category instead of room for that
Mm,
reason. So the things that are in your car, the things that are in your parents' house, the things that are staying at your friend's house for a little bit, those are all included in the Kon-mari event because it's independent of
mm,
location. It's really
mm,
about the categories, the actual items. So, and when it comes to things that you definitively know were from your childhood, but you do not want, but your parents have said, but wait, I want them,
mm,
then you just have to really be very clear about that boundary. Like either put them in a very clear box, like this is my parents'
mm,
box now, or have that conversation. Like you can do whatever you will, like almost like a ceremony. Like I'm
yeah.
taking these things. If
Mhm,
you'd like to now take ownership of this item, then this is now
mhm,
your responsibility. And
mhm,
that can often be kind of blurred when there's things that you do want to keep kind of
mhm,
also in the same space. So yeah, so it's about making those decisions clear because I think that is the best way to kind of communicate that you're doing things a little bit differently now. And yeah, I totally think that taking a picture of things makes perfect sense for a lot of
mhm,
my clients to do that. Like, for example, I had a client who had some trophies and they were
mm,
most of them she let go of, but there was like three that were just had like big stories around them.
mhm.
And she photographed them with the intention of turning that photograph into like a watercolor almost
Oh,
and then framing just the
cool.
watercolor. So a lot of my clients do that. But again, make sure you save those photos to a
Mhm.
specific folder
Yep.
in your
Mhm.
on your phone or wherever because it could get lost in the shuffle of all the umpteen photos we're always
Yeah,
taking day to
yeah,
day.
for sure.
And so, but yeah, definitely photographed makes sense because it starts to get you almost to shift to the logical side of your brain. Like,
Mhm.
why am I keeping this? That this takes up space. Why is this?
Yeah.
Do I want the actual item? or do I just need the memory?
Yeah.
And another question that really helps you beyond does it spark joy when going through sentimental things is the question of will anyone be happier if I keep this?
Mm,
That's a good one to kind of shift into as you move to the sentimental, because that also gets you thinking about the legacy. You making the decision, I want to keep these toys for the future of my legacy for
mm,
kids. So if you make that decision, great. Just
yeah.
make sure you also store them very, very, very well, because
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing
Well,
I don't see people do.
well, as you're talking, I started thinking about I have these old T-shirts from high
Yeah.
school,
Uh-huh.
which I in my head I'm like I'm gonna turn those into one of those quilts, right?
Uh-huh.
But I never have, and also part of me is like, do I even want that quilt?
Yes.
So now I'm
It's
thinking,
funny that
I'm like, now that I'm thinking about it, like, who wants to have a quilt of just
right.
old ratty T-shirts that like I had when I was 16, and now I'm like, I think I'm gonna get rid of them all. I just realized this now. I was like, I'll just take a photo of them all. I'm never wearing them again, but
Yep.
I want to remember them. Why not
Yeah.
just photograph them and get and donate them to somebody that needs shirts? Like I don't. Gosh, now like that's like really like gosh, I gotta, yeah. I'm next
Yeah.
time I'm at my parents' house, which I know they're there, I
Mhm.
will go through them and because I, start with clothing, right?
That's
So,
awesome. It's funny that you brought up that example because I did a
yeah.
specific video on that where I had
Oh,
the
really?
quote. The quote was just a reminder, you're never going to make that t-shirt quilt. I just put it out
Yes.
there. Like you're
Oh my
not going to
gosh,
do it.
that's so
Because
funny.
because it's one of those projects that is like so elusive. I see
Hmm.
people constantly putting on their to-do list, and I literally have seen only one executed in real life,
Yeah.
and that's my sister-in-law. Her mother did create a real t-shirt quilt for her, but it's not that and I don't want to shame quilts. I mean,
Yeah.
there are people
Yeah.
who have businesses around this and they're beautiful
Hmm.
and people do actually create them. But I've never seen actually someone go through those steps of taking the
Mm.
things, submitting them to
Mm.
or doing them
Yeah.
themselves. And I love that video because everyone came out and was telling me
Oh.
their stories
Oh
from
my
like it
gosh.
took me forever to make mine. It took me forever to
Yeah.
clean them because you have to remember like
Oh.
the reason why I like to emphasize you have to store sentimental things well, especially things that are fabric,
Mhm.
because they will get
Yeah.
hard, they will stiffen, they will yellow, they will start to smell
True. It's
musty and then get that
true.
smell. And it is impossible to get them clean, or it takes a whole lot of work to get them
Yeah.
to even like decent condition. And then you don't want to put that on your body as a blanket, after all that work.
Yeah. I
So
just
yeah.
like the more I think like I never like in my head I always saw like I do have a friend that has one, so I like
Uh-huh.
you're right, I have like seen him in real life,
Yeah.
but I'm like high school wasn't a great time for me. Why am I wanting to remember that? Like I
Right.
don't like now that I think about it, it's like yes, like some of the shirts had good memories, but I'm like I
Yeah.
don't need to keep the shirt. It's just a
Nope.
shirt and I have pictures of me in the shirt and I'm never gonna wear a basic t-shirt. I don't even wear those now. Like I don't wear
Right.
those boxy t-shirts that you wore in high school. I don't think I'll ever wear unless I wear them to bed. The only time I ever wear them. But so okay, well we should probably wrap up just because I want to make sure that we have time to answer. Is there anything, any last pieces of advice that you would want to give our people who want to optimize their life and just start the process of
Yeah.
organizing?
Well, I just always like to remind everyone that the act of tidying up, which again is decluttering plus organizing, is not something that we're taught institutionally. Like where it's
Mm,
not,
yeah,
we barely have home ec anymore. It's not
true.
something, no one sits us down and says, this is exactly how you make decisions about what you keep. And then this is exactly how you store it.
Mm.
Has never existed. So if you have a lot of shame or fear or
Mhm.
angst or frustration around this loop that you are in when it comes to decluttering your home, it's not because you're just a failure and this is just something you should innately know or just naturally understand. It's a skill that you just have not
Mm.
learned. So that's
Mhm.
why I love when I saw your podcast, I love it because I always describe the Kon-mari method as a tool to put in your adulting toolbox, basically, to have with you for, of course, your initial
Mhm.
original tidying event, but also when you move and your boundary of your space changes,
Mm.
or you welcome in a new baby and you've got like a big influx of things coming in, or you downsize and retire. Those are all going to be moments where you'll have to like activate the tidying skill a little bit, nowhere near your original event, but a little bit, you know. So
Mhm.
it's like this skill that you learn and you keep with you. So I like to
Mhm.
really make sure everyone understands that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I've built a book to get people started,
Oh.
the Tidy Home Joy Journal, and that helps break that loop, that cycle of frustration and
Mm.
false starts. You know, people just saying, "Oh, I've got to just be able to know how to do this and get this done," and I'm like, "No, actually,
Mm.
you've reached a plateau and you need help."
Yeah.
So yes, so
Yeah.
I have a tool to help people if they're
That's
feeling
awesome.
stuck. Hmm.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of us aren't educated on the process, and I think
Yeah,
that's why I think the KonMari method is really helpful, and I also think just any method for anything in life is good. I
yeah,
recently read a book on the order of foods in which you should eat. I didn't know
yeah.
this. I didn't know that you're supposed to start your meals with fiber. Like I didn't know this. Like so like I'm like we were taught like in school like you should eat the food pyramid. Like some of this stuff is outdated first of all, but
Hmm.
also like hearing from experts, we have so much access on social media now to experts. One of the I've done a couple of episodes of this podcast about cycle syncing with
Hmm.
your period. We didn't learn that in school. Like
Nope,
all of this stuff that now we as a society are learning is because of experts on social media, and I think that's really exciting because it's
it
like
is.
we get access for free to people that we would have never known about otherwise, and it's educating our entire world about, hey, we weren't taught this, but I have been trained in it and I can show you at least the starting way to get started with this. And I sorry, I get like really excited about that because it's like education can help your life, and I
Yeah.
think learning these tools, and that's what this whole podcast is about, is I bring on experts that are an expert in something that I think people need to know more about. And I think that for a lot of people, organizing is something that can impact, I think your environment impacts your mindset, your mental
Hmm.
health. And if you are constantly like feeling overwhelmed by your stuff, you're not going to be healthy as a person, you know?
Exactly. Or if you're constantly trying to reorganize or like never ending cycle,
Yes.
also not healthy either. So that's what I love about this. It's super tangible. It's super like, here's the start,
Hmm.
here's the
Yes.
finish. And now go off and shift your attention to your finances, your health, your
Yeah.
hobby, your
Yes.
relationships, all these other
Yes.
things that matter, not managing your home. You know, it's a
Hmm.
supporting character, to
Yeah,
all
that's
these other
true.
activities that have to
Yeah.
be expressed in a space.
For sure. And I think once people have a system, just
Yeah,
maintenance, and you've mentioned that. So how do we find you on social media, and how do people connect with you off on there?
sure, sure. So I always say all roads lead to fortheloveoftidy.com. And then
Okay.
my handles are at For the Love of Tidy over on TikTok and Instagram. That's where I show up the most, building a community over on TikTok with a lot of different opinions and thoughts going on over there.
Yeah.
And then pulling people into the behind the scenes over on Instagram stories. So
Awesome.
that's where I show up.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Thanks, Jen.